I decided to continue with this series because I've heard that it's been really helpful. Um, and since it's such a long drawing process and we're not going to stop until they're all perfect, it's not like you're just going to draw and then we're going to do the project. We're going to really take time. We don't want this to be just a line study on a grid because grids can be inaccurate and people tend to press too hard and lose the gestural quality. The other thing I wanted to point out is that if something is blurry in your picture, you don't want to exaggerate it. For example, this. From here up here it looks defined, but if you zoomed in, you would notice that it's actually really fuzzy. It's not defined like some of these other areas, like this. In this particular picture, most of the picture's fuzzy, which is perfect for watercolor. Even something like this is fuzzy. It's not really this hard linear perspective. It's a weird thing to get used to, but I think the problem that happens is you get so caught up in getting everything in place, and you have to anyway, which is a big step here. But even when it looks super accurate, it might be a little off only because you're outlining blurry things. But even more important than not outlining blurry things is that these are opportunities for wet and wet blending. Let's say you wet this whole thing, and when it's damp, then paint in one or the other. Then you create this fuzzy line. We want to match that kind of ethereal softness. All this are the opportunities for good technique. These are somewhat soft. This is soft. These are the only crisp moments. So if you can really reserve your crisp energy, in other words, those pointy brushes, the real clean stuff, only here, then the rest will have different layers of visibility. This is medium fuzz, this is more fuzz, this is most fuzz. And that's what creates the atmospheric perspective. This happens with the candy, with the jelly beans, with all of those things. It's almost better when the picture is not as good of a quality too, because watercolor is not about edges and lines. If this were like a pencil drawing or like a acrylic painting, it'd be a whole different deal. But we're looking at this in terms of potential technique, or at least allowing to look at it later that way. I get though that you want to get it all on there, you want to see what it is, but the next step would be kind of softening these areas and not pressing when you transfer. The best way is to not transfer this stuff at all. Only transfer the general placement. That's why the yellow can be so effective, because it's hard to see. But I always suggest if it's blended, paint it instead of transfer it. There's areas you can transfer, moments of crisp, but that's more for compositional accuracy. The minute you put a line real hard, even if it's transfer with carbon or gray, you're stuck with it, and then you end up with a cartoon bottles. If it's yellow, at least if you press hard, you have the chance to come back into that softness, but you also can lose it just by the pressure on the yellow. So the ideal thing is don't even transfer the parts that are soft. All right, but I wanted to go to the next step because I just did a little bit of linear perspective and where these dots hit. Pretend this is giant watercolor paper. There's no other way I can fit this in here and no other way for you to really see what the source is. But the technique is the same. Pretend this is your 15 by 20 watercolor paper to scale. All right, so you want to have your colored pencils ready. You're studying this, and the reason this is helpful to me is I mentioned that I can't work with you on your picture as I would in class. So it's very individual, and when I make these generic pictures, it's hard to understand what I'm talking about if it's not yours. But the good thing is now I have a chance to really get to know this one as I would yours, and I can start making observations based on my study. So that's why I did this. So I'm going to use this kind of a burnt umber color. Okay. Well, it's actually more like a raw umber color. There's so many different types of hues, but anyway, whatever. Okay, so I've done some more linear perspective, and standing is good, it's better. So you see what's happening here. This is a perfect circle. It's a circle. Then you go, wait a minute, this is a circle. Wait a minute, that's a circle. So these obviously are not, they're ellipses, but they're leaning, so that's tricky. But we're gonna do this. And this is where you're moving in a gesture. You're not just tracing like this in one square, studying one square. That's step one. But now we want to break away from each square. When you're doing a grid, you have to focus square by square. You can't just wing it and try the whole thing. But this is gesture, so I'm going around and around. And I have a sense of where this hits. This down here hits in here. Great practice for training your hand to create circles. The more you practice, the better. All right, so it's in here. If you were doing a regular drawing in class, there would be no grid. You would just be looking at something like this and going like that. So that's a gestural mark. Then I have this one. And when it goes off the side, I'm going to make it darker so you can see. When it goes off the side like this, you have to go off the side with it. Kind of goes to the edge of this, off the edge. Sometimes it goes right on your table, so it's good to tape something down if you don't want marks on it. But keep going, going, going. Now this one will be bigger than this one because it's in front and you've got linear perspective very subtly. And they overlap, which is part of why I picked this picture, because it's got good design qualities. So when you have this one in there, this one has to overlap and draw off the edge. And see how I'm drawing through this? The definition of gesture is drawing through. Drawing off the edge, through, pretend every object is transparent. Then we're going to start to find these angles and duplicate them. Instead of doing, I mean, you have the grid that you would have done all clean under lines, but now we have to verify and loosen it up and give it an energy. Gesture's energy, grid is flat. Grid is control. Gesture is more of a letting go and an estimation. And it familiarizes you with the subject, and it takes you closer to the medium, which is watercolor, which is loose. So we don't want to get stuck in a tight medium when we're going to be doing a loose one. Okay, you can see this edge. If you're trying to figure out an angle, of course, you can always do a dot and a dot, like we did with the linear, which would be, and you count it over, it's between E and F, and it's just past halfway. So you can do that, and you would have already done that by now. And then you have G and H, and it hits just here. So when you connect these as a line on your grid, it's tight. But if you go back and go like this, loose, 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 and even extend it, that's gesture. So you always want to draw through, and you always want to use the whole motion of your arm in the whole page. And that really is basically what gesture is. Same thing here. You've got E2, E2. Now, if I were to draw this as a grid, it would look something like this. It would be really tight, and I would figure out, which this is great because you're still drawing. You're still learning how to draw, and you're still doing design per square. But you can see how with this would be a grid mark. But if you do gesture, you're apt to already start to know the softness. See how soft this is and how crisp that is? These are the things I call getting to know your subject. But instead of going like this and then going, okay, this goes to here, and doing this hard line, you can do that first, but then it's this. Then it's, you do this here, boom, 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 and then draw your energy here, boom, boom, boom. If you start bigger and get smaller, it's better. Gesture is better big. You want to think big. And then you have this one. Now instead of going G up here, you have done this by now. That's fine. You have this line. And you've done real careful study. In a way, grid takes longer because with gesture, you're estimating. So let's say you got this off, because mechanical lines are always off. So instead of doing these itty bitty little white freckly whatever this is here, you want to think of it as an ellipse, because remember your ellipse is going to get steeper as you go down. So if your ellipse is like this here, the next one has to be bigger. So this is where the swirly slinky happens, and you go off the edge. You don't want to try to cramp it into the edge. This goes clear off the edge. And now you can see I just made a correction. So by using gesture, I've just corrected something I did on my grid. We've got this. And then we have, another thing to note is even though these things are sometimes look like they're bending, like here, they're actually going this way and then this way and then this way. The problem is people tend to exaggerate curves. All right, so E, 1, 2, 3. So you could start with this like you would on your regular. And you can do your whole grid first. That's probably the best approach. And then switch to gesture. If you keep just making more and more and more squares smaller and smaller, you'll get closer, but you'll still have that same energetic experience visually. See, now I'm doing this line and this line. See these crisscross? Boom and boom. And this is boom and boom. Now, you would think that this is just a curve, a hard curve, but it's a soft chopsticks. It's two chopsticks. This is a gestural technique too. So when you see a curve, instead of doing round, a lot of times we'll do line, 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 because we want this structural. Structure is the goal. So this is, you keep doing this. This goes up, this goes out. Try to do this. I don't want to mess up the picture too much so I can't see it, but see how this goes up and there? So over here, your E3, instead of being real careful with it, you want to go loosely up, extend, and then out. That way you have this crisscross, 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 crisscross. Nuances are best left for the painting. We're really getting the, it's like we're building the bones here. Gesture is the bones. Another thing that's important to do is find the axis, which I dabbled on a bit here. And whatever you have on an angle here in your image, whether it's a painting or on paper, whatever, you can hold it in the air and carefully carry it over. That's a wonderful way to double check your angles. If it's here, carry it over. Any tool you have to make this easier on yourself, the better. So I'm going to find the center. When you find the center axis of a man-made object, or even something that's a tree or human or whatever, you want to get the sense of this, but not just the sense, you want to actually render it. So I'm going to use blue. When you render this, you don't want to end where it ends. It doesn't really end here structurally. It goes down to here. So these dots were helpful, but you don't want to connect them anything with a ruler in gesture. Rulers are good for finding distances, finding angles, but you never want to use them to connect anything. Now in this case, that's fine, but I mean when you're in gesture, especially when they're not lined up. So the key here, this is the key. If you get in this habit, and this is for more than just this class, this is anytime you make an art piece that involves rendering from observation, you want to draw off the table, like way off the table. And then here, you want to go way off the top. And you may go, why would I bother doing that? Way. Because now you're creating an opportunity for yourself to use that line to draw everything else. Now you can see where this line hits on this. If this line goes up to here, now you haven't reserved one thing. You haven't just narrowed yourself to one object. Now you're moving into this one, and you're using an invisible extended line to draw the next one. So it's like a gift. Everything we do is to help you draw accurately. Grids are helpful. Extended lines here for linear perspective are helpful. Center ellipses are helpful. Drawing completely through is helpful because now this area has another indicator, another anchor. So when I go in here to see, I can go look at this now, not just whatever that was. So it's made my life easier. So now when I fill this, I can see based on this. Let's see if I can show you. Now I see there's this, then there's a gap, then there's this. Over here, there's this, then there's a little sliver gap, then there's this. Especially if I did a little more pressure here. So see how I have 1, 2, 3, boom, boom, boom. Over here, boom, boom, boom. Those are the moments. This, all that. The subject is not, it's like the goal is to draw everything but the picture. Draw everything but your image. If you do that, you're going to be a great, skilled artist because you'll be able to really draw. Like this, I'm going to draw through. I mean, I could be here all day. You know, this takes 10 hours a week minimum when you do a good drawing. But the more we do this pre-transfer, the better off we're going to be when we get to the actual, although this is the actual project, but all right, so this is another way to do it. Here's another extended line. It starts here off the edge, and it goes through to C right here. But instead of, again, connecting with a ruler, it's already there. I'm sure you already have a line there, but now on top of that grid, you can do this. What I would recommend is before you start the gestural part, put a piece of tracing paper over this. You'll still be able to see through to the grid, but you'll be drawing clean. You'll be drawing without the grid. And that forces you to start rendering. It changes how your mind works because now you're rendering from this loose structural manner and the grid is only supplemental. So here I am drawing right on the grid, but if I took my tracing paper, and this is better with really transparent paper, but transparent watercolor paper is super expensive. But if you put this on top and then develop this, then you're going to end up with this really nice structural, gestural version of your picture. All the marks, all the extended marks, but not the grid. So then you end up with something much more natural. That's what I would do right now. I would just start to build on the tracing paper. The other thing is you're saving yourself a step because eventually you're going to transfer from tracing paper so that you have your version on here instead of sketch paper. So that's what I'm sorry, I did it backwards, but no, it would be here. It'd be here. You're drawing on here. All right. But before I would do that, I just want you to be able to see. So, all right, one more thing because I can get really off on this. Not to use value to do little bits on top. We know they're there. We're going to deal with them later. We're going to use the white as paper. We're going to strategize what to leave white, whatever. But right here, now, I'm going to use a dark value, not on top, but behind. I'm not doing this. I already decided that this is, you never want to take anything away. But in this case, I think this was an error of something was on it when I was Xeroxing it or something. It just looks like an accident on a Xerox machine, so I'm just getting rid of that. That's not one of the values I'm referring to here. It looks better already, just so you know. You don't ever want to add stuff that isn't there or take away stuff that is, but in that case, it just looked like the Xerox thing, whatever. Okay, so if I had I don't know, I just don't like that. Anyway, I don't want to get into all this, but you don't need that. Okay, next thing, last thing. Take a dark, like a 4B if you have it, so you don't have to press as hard, it won't hurt your arm as much. And we're only going to fill the negative space of darks. This is the main thing value is used for. People think that value is for decorative reasons and volume and making it all pretty, and really it's not. Like, this is positive, not dealing with it, only filling negative space. So I'm using this as a guide. For example, see how that shape is triangular when I don't have it like that? That's a great tool. So in this area I can go, okay, well this part of the triangle is lighter, but I'm going to do up to here and go, see, I'm not worried about over here, I'm just filling this right now. See that? That's key. Now I can move that and do the rest. It goes over to here. And it's negative space. You can fill it in any direction. We're not doing cross contour yet. And travel. Now here's another one. This one I would do with gray if I had it. Or in this case, a pencil works better. Regular pencil. And it goes very soft. So this one you wouldn't outline at all because it's so blurry. So you want to use pencil and go like that. Smear it. Smear. In fact, smear is perfect whenever you can't see something. Like, it's not that you can't see it. You just want to get rid of your line, erase your hard grid line, and really smear. Because the smear is the volume, the smear is the softness, the smear is the watercolor technique. We don't want to be committed to a line. So that's the next step. Fill the darks with black, fill the grays with grays, smear the ones that are not dark, and then guess what? You're now starting to get to know the values in your picture. The whole point of rendering is to develop a relationship with your subject over time, over observation. This is what we're looking for. And right now I'm just feeling like this is very clean here, but really when you look closely, it's soft. So I don't want to fill it completely black, so I can fill a darker pencil or more pressure. Maybe mix it with the black, but I don't want it as black as this, because this is darker. Now I'm going, okay, what's the darkest thing in here? Boom, 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 boom. What's the middle values? Boom, 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 boom. Dark. Where's the lightest values? Boom, 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 boom. Then where's the white? Anyway, this was very long-winded. There's so much more, but I want you to get a sense of what to look for. And one thing leads to another, and it's very intuitive, but our goal is to get away from stage one and really start to build the loose structural components and develop a sense of the shapes of value and where smushy blend, a lot of smushy. And with the watercolor, it won't be pencil, but it'll be technique that will mimic that blurriness. Okay, I've talked too much.